Hello, Mandibil here. Wanted to discuss something with you I've been thinking about for a while, which is a claim or statement I have made a few times, mainly during my deconstructions of Stefan Molyneux's videos recently. And my statement is this, that unless a statement is about clarifying statements, as I'm doing now, or they are about propositions or pure philosophy, then they are sophistry, some kind of manipulation, right? Because there's nothing else it can be, basically, right? So, I mean, if you work from the worst case mentality, I've made a video about this principle, which I'm not sure whether or not I made it in English or in Danish, but at least I've made a video. I might check up on whether or not I need to make an English version, because I am of the conviction at this point that I think I'm going to continue this channel purely in English, unless there is some particular thing with relation to the Danish language or Danish users, listeners or something. Unless it's necessary, I will do it in English henceforth. And what I was going on about is that it might not actually quite be the case, what I'm saying, right? The statement. But it is good enough to function very well in order for you to be on your guards whether or not you're being sort of manipulated or somebody's actually trying to be constructive, right? They're actually trying to add value to your life. Maybe by adding value to their own life and communicating to you about it, they will sort of give you an opportunity to, participate in that value appreciation or value creation. So, sort of, I mean, if I have a, lemonade stand and you have money, well, if you want the lemonade and I want the money and we can get an agreement on the amounts, well, then we are both more happy, presumably, afterwards, because we both voluntarily entered into the trade and the trade occurred, right? So it's, and that's sort of, a proposition with a stated value, right? Is with a stated price, a quantified price, right? This object, it could be a service, right? But let's stay with objects. This object is for sale. You want it? Well, it's a proposition. That's an elephant, or that's a bicycle, right? Do you want that bicycle, right? It's a proposition about a bicycle. It's sort of, I believe this bicycle is true because I experience it, or I'm claiming it, conforming to my proposition. That's why I'm making the proposition, right? And I am willing to enter into a trade, which is sort of implicitly saying I am considering that proposition to be true, right? So these are propositions that are basically about objects. And that is value creation. But when somebody is trying to, throw around abstractions and various emotions and unfounded statements of this and that and the other, I would basically consider it manipulation, right? And the difficult one is when unfounded philosophy attempting to or claiming to be straight up philosophy, that is what called sophistry, right? Because it has this hammer of authority that it's philosophy, right? I have PhDs in this, right? You should, you can't handle the truth. Let me do it for you and tell you how it is, right? Then if it's not about creating pure philosophy, stating some reduction basis, making some axioms, stating some definitions, and what is knowledge, what is truth, what is objectivity, what is a moral principle, what is ethics, so on. Straight up philosophy, right? Then it's possibly sophistry. Then you're also being manipulated, right? So it's not really that difficult, right? Just because it's like when somebody asks you a question, right? Are you sort of obliged to answer the question? Are you? Isn't it just because that not answering the question would look ridiculous? Well, if you're in your workplace and somebody sits next to you and eat their lunch or something, and they say, well, okay, how was your weekend? And you just pretend you're not hearing it. It would seem weird, right? But who says you have an obligation to tell somebody else about your weekend or your emotional experiences, whatever it is they're going for, right? During your weekend. I mean, there's no rules that says, maybe there is a rule, but fuck the rules, right? So it's all this sort of culture. You're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, and so on, right? That is basically all manipulation. All this is manipulation of some kind. It is not necessarily, malevolent manipulation. It could be a sort of a harmless kind of manipulation, but still, right? But when you're asking somebody about their weekend, right? I'm usually not that interested in some, arbitrary person's weekend, right? I might be if it's a colleague close to me. I like to have sort of, but it's in some ways it's just in order to, to some extent to virtue signal, right? Asking somebody how their weekend was, right, is sort of a nice thing to do, and you're sort of showing interest in them, and striking up a conversation of some kind, or just to get things going, or acknowledging that we're back to work, or whatever, something like that, right? It's not really because you want to understand how their weekend went, right? As they go into tirades, for a couple of hours about what they were doing that weekend, then you're going to say, okay, yeah, okay, so sure, okay, see you in an hour, whatever, right? And it is also one of those things that you have probably gotten used to when somebody asks you, how was your weekend? But you say, well, it was great, huh? Well, this, that, and then you cut and say, well, how was your weekend, right? Just to sort of, it's just, polite talk, right? Small talk. It's harmless, basically, but it doesn't carry anything significant. It doesn't have any significance to it, right? It's basically to strike up a conversation, right? So you could say, I want to feel good about myself, so I'm going to ask this person about the weekend. Even though I'm not really that into understanding their weekend, right? But I'm going to do it anyway, because if I don't do it, they might think that I'm not interested in them, because people are usually talking about weekends on Mondays, right? So if I do it, I'm sort of on board with how things are being run, or how things are supposed to run. So there's all these sorts of balances or niceties, right? So you could say it's a slightly, if I ask somebody, how was your weekend? I do it mostly because I don't want to be the guy who doesn't ask people about the weekend, right? Or I don't want to, it not doesn't, it's, grammatics. But you know what I mean, right? And if people say, well, why do we ask about, I'm just, I'm just interested, I just want to know how you went, how it went, how you're feeling, and, something like that, right? If everything was okay, you can sort of back out of it with your head held high, right? If you ask people about their, their favorite sexual position or something like that, right? It might be slightly more difficult to back out of the conversation, right? Oh my God, there's a big traffic jam here. I hope it clears up quickly. So what are we left with? We are left with propositions. That's an elephant, that's a dog, that's a sandwich, and so on, right? Or pure philosophy, talking straight up metaphysics, straight up epistemology, and so on, right? Trying to be rigid and clear in your speaking or using, not contradicting yourself, not using words out of context, or repeating the word, conflating terms, or and so on, right? Not making any fallacies, or not bringing in stuff out of left field that you weren't supposed to bring in or haven't clarified. All these things, right? Otherwise, that would be sophistry when we're talking philosophy, right? So, I mean, the propositions are basically quite straightforward, right? They have to reference some object, some concept, right? Now, the delineations of what references and concept and what does not reference a concept might at times be fluffy, and it's sort of up to you yourself. I can't tell you where you should draw the line, right? But there's a difference between an elephant and, a square, right? Square is more sort of an abstraction of a shape, but an elephant is something that is connected with a direct experience, right? So I would say a square is not an object when an elephant is an object, right? Because it has a very clear sort of shape and a clear understanding of colors and sounds and so on. The scopes of these qualia are quite, distinct to me, right? And of course, when I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm sort of working from a built-in axiom that you have the same kind of experience and you are able to make the same kind of cognitions like an elephant, right? So that's basically, that's it. And the deconstructions I've been doing the last 4 or 5 months or something like that, 3 of Stefan, it goes back even further, right? A year maybe. I'm losing track of time. A year maybe I've been doing these deconstructions of 3 of Stefan Molyneux's books, and a lot of his, at least a fair amount of his videos, which deals with some specific philosophical topic. And then the notorious Bernardo Kastrup course on analytic idealism. And I might add that I haven't heard anything further about his copyright infringement claim, which is also ridiculous when we're dealing with philosophical discourse, right? You're not allowed to use my videos to comment directly on my statements about the most important questions in philosophy. No, you can't have a open discourse about this. No, that's stupid, right? He should be happy that somebody's. Yeah, there may be a few things here and there that are where I'm going astray, but there might be a few goodies also, right? So I have no respect for that, right? Absolutely no respect at all. We'll threaten people with violence, which is basically what the state is. State is a threat of violence. It's ultimately a threat of murder, right? If you're not complying with the rules, you will ultimately be killed, right? And if you don't understand that, well, you're part of the problem then, right? You're part of the problem that is it keeps going because people don't understand this is what is going on, right? So So basically, that's my claim, is that if it's not a proposition or pure philosophy, then it's bullshit, right? It's basically, I mean, it's not harmful bullshit. It's not that you can't ask people about how their weekend went, right? There's also some, building up a reputation as a nice person and so on, right? I like that. I don't mind people asking me about my weekend. I tend to tell them what I've been doing. Maybe if I, did something that I wouldn't like to tell them about, well, okay, I will keep that to myself. But, if I, was in my garden, or I, watched a movie, or baked the pizza, or whatever, well, tell them about that, right? Why not? I mean, why not? Or maybe you have some interest you can talk with people about, and they may be actually interested in hearing more about it, right? So it's not necessarily malevolent when it's not propositions or pure philosophy. But it's clear to me that what has been going on with language through the years have been, 90% manipulation and 10%, propositions and philosophy, right? The rest of the time it's been something manipulative in order to get something, right? In order to get people to behave or have a specific understanding that makes them do something rather than something else, which is beneficial for somebody else, and so on, right? I mean, people are susceptible to stories. Their life is a story. Your life is a story you tell yourself, right? And other people tell you, and you accept them, right? A part of your life might be the pandemic. You have just been told a story. You have no clue about whether or not there is a pandemic, right? You have heard, that there's somebody sick there because those people over there says that, and so on, right? You're being force-fed stories. You're being manipulated, right? That's my go-to solution when it's not a proposition or it's pure philosophy. Then I'm going to sort of treat it as manipulation. I mean, it's a harmless manipulation, as I said before, when you talk, people are asking you about your weekend or, whatever, your trip to the Canary Islands or whatever, right? It's harmless. It's very, almost harmless, right? And if you can handle that, okay, I mean, then you need to up your game, right? But be careful, and in order to handle this, right? This is about understanding how you're being manipulated, when you're being manipulated, right? When you are potentially being manipulated, but you don't know it, well, then I think it's a good idea to first consider it a kind of manipulation until you sort of can get clarified whether or not it actually is manipulation or it's some kind of, important that could have huge consequences for you, right? So it's in all cases in life, it's about figuring out whether you're being manipulated, you're being used somehow, right? And a lot of things, a lot of what is going on is grooming people into accepting all sorts of fucking bullshit, right? It's about getting people to accept that you have to pay your taxes, you have to do now you are a father or grandfather, now you have this obligation, and it says in the book that you have to be like this and you have to do that, and all these stories that are being force-fed into the throat of people, right? This is mostly bullshit. It's pure bullshit. Religion is bullshit, right? Governments is bullshit. Families are basically bullshit, right? You get a title, you're a father or your grandfather, or you're a son, or you're a daughter, or you're this. You're being titled into submission. Oh, but you are one of those, so you have these obligations. Where the hell did that come from, right? Is it a proposition? Is it pure philosophy? Well, I consider it manipulation then, right? Just do this test in your mind and say, well, Okay, somebody is trying to communicate with me verbally or by some other, some other way, right? Some woman showing her tits, with cleavage or something. Well, she is communicating, right? Not verbally, but physically, let's say, right? Or a well-groomed man with broad shoulders and big tattoos on his arm and whatever it is, right? To show off his, jeans or whatever, right? That's also a kind of communication, right? That's manipulation. Rather than not doing it, they're doing it in order to get an effect. And trying to argue or communicate to get a particular effect is, by definition, a manipulation, right? If you're saying that's an elephant, it's hard to call it manipulation, right? You're just, stating what you potentially think is obvious, right? Me receiving the proposition cannot know whether or not you're lying, but if you're pointing somewhere and saying elephant, and as soon as I look in that direction and I see elephant, it would be fucking weird if you were not experiencing that elephant you just made a proposition about, right? Correctly in both concept and pointing, right? So, and there's so much, 99.99% of communication between human beings is some kind of manipulation, right? Appealing to your fear, appealing to your desires, appealing to your emotions or your sentimentality, or also it's actually very much appealing to your emotions in some way or another, right? It's not appealing to your reasoning skills, right? It's not an appeal to reasoning, because that's so hard to manipulate, right? If you say that's an elephant and that's not an elephant, people are saying, what the fuck, are you crazy, man, right? And if you're saying, well, I think my reduction base is this, people will not say, are you manipulating me? They will say, okay, that's interesting. I have a different reduction base, or I agree with you. This is sort of pure philosophy, right? So it's hard to, when you're down to the basics, which is basically what we need. We need to communicate how we get to the conclusions we get to by using philosophy and referring to the objects we experience, so we can, work together in order to handle them, right? That's what we need to do. But there's so much value creation in manipulating human beings into all sorts of weird understandings, right? The understanding that your prime minister or, Joe Biden, that poor old bastard, right? Sick old bastard, is going to, save the world or control. But what the fuck, man, right? He can't even fucking tie his own shoes, man. He doesn't know what he's doing, man. Maybe he doesn't even know what he's saying. He doesn't even know where he is, right? He certainly looks like it. That fantasy that there's some people who can figure out what 500 million people need, right, and make it great for everybody, right? It's ridiculous, man. I'm not even sure how to run my own life, right? And I've been philosophizing for 10 years, so it's not like it's just it's sort of an easy task, right? And then an old geezer like, Joe Biden, creepy old Joe, is going to be some kind of angel who's making sure that everybody is okay. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous, right? And that goes for everybody else. Boris Johnson or Donald Trump or, Justin Trudeau or Mette Frederiksen in Denmark and, whatever they're called everywhere in the world, right? I don't care who they are. They are not there because they're going to save you or help you. Only in the case that you are a useful idiot to some extent that they can use for their ends, right? Their manipulative ends. They particularly don't like propositions, and they particularly don't like philosophy, because that's where you have to stand by your shit, right? It's much easier just to, you know, follow the manipulative trail and keep people, you know, soaked in this fantasy of manipulation, right? So that was my thoughts today. Hope you enjoyed it. Jump in another day for another video, and, you know, share, like, and subscribe, and join the Discord. Hopefully there's a link below. Otherwise, have a nice day. See you next time.